Hello, everybody. Welcome to my presentation. My name is Maren Kroeger. I work for UNHCR as Tertiary Education Officer, and I'm going to speak about refugee education in times of COVID-19, and the focus will be on higher education. Very quickly about UNHCR. We are the UN Refugee Agency, and we want to make sure that everybody on the world has the right to seek asylum and to find a safe refuge. Our main mandate is sort of the pursuing international protection and to make sure that governments are following the convention, the Refugee Convention from 1951. The foundational definition, I would like to share with you the definition of who is a refugee, especially as there's sometimes some confusion around refugees, asylum seeker, migrants. So I'm reading out the definition that had been put into the convention from 1951. A refugee is someone who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reason of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable to, or owing to such fear, unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country. So there are three elements that are really important for the definition of a refugee. One is the well-founded fear of persecution, based on 5 reasons: race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. That person has to cross an international border, and the country of origin is not able to provide the protection that that person would need. For UNHCR, we are working jointly with governments to make sure that that right of seeking asylum and international protection is fulfilled. Our mandate does not only include refugees, we are also working with asylum seekers, a statelessness person, and in some regards also with internally displaced people and returnees. Now coming to refugee education worldwide. Once a year, we are releasing global data where we compare access to education for refugees in comparisons to the global average. And as you see on the slides, for primary education, there had been quite some achievements. We are at 63% refugees accessing primary education in comparison to 91 globally. But then it goes dramatically down when it comes to secondary education, with only 24% of refugees accessing it in comparison to 84% globally. And then for higher education, it's only 3% of refugees that have access in comparison to 37%. What is our approach to education? I think the most important message is that we want to make sure that refugees have access to the national education system, that they are included into the national schools, that they are learning the national curriculum, and that they are sort of the schools they are accessing are supervised and supported by ministries of education. We also want that within the emergency, within the first phase of 3 months of displacement, quality education programs are made available to refugees, and we support that through our partners through different ways. So it can be, for example, cash grants, so that families have sufficient funds to support children to pay for transport and school materials. We support capacity building for teachers, in some cases also teacher salaries. We make sure that the learning environment is safe, and we in general strengthen partnership and make sure that key education providers are aware about the refugees and the specific situations and barriers that refugees are facing. As I have said, we are working jointly with governments for education, specifically with ministries of education, but also with other international organizations such as, for example, UNICEF, or big partnerships like the Global Partnership for Education or the fund Education Cannot Wait. In our strategy that we have released last year, that is aligned with the sort of the timeline of the SDG 4, we have highlighted our commitment to sustainable inclusion into national education systems, but we also have aligned ourselves with the strategic direction of UNHCR and the Global Compact on Refugees that had been released end of 2016. We are working with a lot of different strategic partnerships, education actors, development actors supporting the education sectors, but also with the private sector, who's an important partner for education programs. And we make sure that transition to employment and sort of the goal of achieving resilient and solution for refugees is part of education programs. Now coming to higher education for refugees, this is an area, this is at the end of the education continuum, and therefore it enables refugees to become self-reliant and to contribute to the peaceful development of their host, but also of their home countries. And it gives them a perspective for possibly return, but also an opportunity to work in the country of asylum or even moving into a third country for further study or employment opportunities. Education strategy, we have set the very ambitious goal of achieving 50% by refugees accessing higher education by 2030. As you have seen on the previous slide, we are currently at 3%. So this is a very ambitious goal, and we need all partners to support us in achieving so. So this can be achieved through several different approaches. So for example, an opportunity would be to support refugees with scholarship programs. And we do so ourselves through the DAFI scholarship program that is supporting refugees in country of asylum to access a national university. And this is specifically addressing the gap of the financial barrier refugees often have in order to support themselves to go to university. But there are also a lot of other scholarship programs available, and this is something where we advocate to make sure that scholarship programs include refugees and other displaced persons. Another avenue is access to higher education through blended learning programs, the so-called connected learning programs. And they are often offered in areas that are very remote and where universities are very far, and students have the opportunity through a combination of face-to-face and online learning models to access quality higher education programs that are often provided in partnerships with universities, for example, in the US or in Canada with national universities in the respective countries. We are also talking about technical and vocational training. A segment of the TVET programs can be considered higher education if they are, for example, offered at a technical college. They are more skill focused and have a sort of a clearer avenue into employment opportunity. We also talk about complementary pathways or so-called third country scholarships. So that means that a refugee from a specific country of asylum is moving into a third country to continue their studies. And this is an area that is of huge interest and also has an opportunity for a more permanent solution for a refugee who is then maybe in a country where they can access after graduation further employment opportunities. But we also work more generally with ministries, universities, and academia to expand access for refugees to universities and to mitigate barriers. And actually the last point is maybe the point with which we can make the biggest impact, to be sure that existing programs include refugees, that we make sure that the barriers, for example, refugee students who have to pay international student fees are considered as nationals and access under the same conditions, but also that there might be additional language courses for refugees who are not speaking the language of instruction or not speaking it on that level that is required, or that there are specific support programs in terms of academic training so that they are able to follow the course and to submit successful papers. So there are different types of barriers, and the actors in the higher education space play a specific role. Another big area is the recognition of previous learning. So to make sure that documents or learning that had been done in a country of origin, for example, is recognized in the country of asylum. So through all of these different avenues and through the work of all the different partners, we hope that we will be able to achieve that goal of 15 by 30. Now coming to the COVID-19 pandemic and refugee education, as all of you will know, the pandemic had a severe impact on the education system and access to school for children and young people worldwide. In most of the countries, schools had been closed for a while, university had been closed, and students had been forced to learn at home under often difficult conditions. So for us in the COVID-19 response, we have several points that are very important. So the first thing is that we are aligned with the respective national response of each country. So to be sure that the measures that each country is setting out are followed and sort of included in all of the response programs. And we advocate strongly for including refugees into those national response plans. That can be for education, that can be for health, that can be in communication, to be sure that refugees are considered a group that needs specific attention within the national response. We are following WHO guidelines, and we are advocating for a continuation of learning. And that continuation of learning can be done through very different models. It can be done online, but we have also seen in countries where there is a low-tech environment and very limited connectivity, that this can be done through either TV or through radio programs, or even through pouching learning materials in envelopes to make sure that students have books and material at home to continue. And now we are working on making sure that refugees can also return safely to school, and that the schools are equipped with all the sort of tools to fulfill the guidelines of the respective countries. And this is specifically important for refugees, as they are often already at the risk of dropping out. And now through that lockdown, there's maybe a higher risk for refugees to not return to school under safe conditions. Now coming to higher education and COVID-19, within our own program, we have made sure that we continue to pay allowances for DAFI scholarship holders so that they have received the monthly payment from our side. We also have covered additional costs in case they had to travel somewhere else after university closure. We make sure that we facilitate remote learning through, for example, distribution of devices and additional connectivity. Through, for example, vouchers or additional allowances. We also make sure that they receive reliable, timely information, and also, if required, additional counseling. And also we are covering medical expenses under the DAFI scholarship framework as needed. Now to conclude, I would like to share stories from our different programs, what the students have done themselves in order to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. You see here two photos of Adieu. She is a DAFI graduate in Kenya, and she has produced masks and soaps and has distributed them in Dadaab and Kakuma. It's a complete self-organized project. We have supported access to the camps and supported the distribution mechanism. In Senegal, we had another DAFI alumni who is now working with UN Women, who has raised funds among staff, among colleagues, but also among DAFI students and alumni. And he had sufficient money so that he could equip 25 vulnerable households with food, but also with hygienic items. And then that had been distributed through our partner. Similar action took place in Zambia, where DAFI students also have raised funds to provide soap and hand washing basins and face masks in a transit center. So all of that are examples of the students committed to give back to their community and to know that they are part of the response. We also have a lot of students that have studied health-related programs. They are either doctors, but also nurses. And here you have a photo of Bahati, who is a Rwandan refugee in Kenya, who has graduated as a nurse, and she's working as a volunteer for UNHCR, but at the same time, she's also volunteering in a hospital in Nairobi, directly involved in the COVID-19 response. So you see that in last year, we had over 20% of our DAFI scholars studying in health-related program. So another big advocacy point to be sure that refugees have access to higher education is that they are actually studying fields that are relevant to society and can now contribute in this pandemic to the response. I would like to conclude my presentation. I'm open to questions. I will join the virtual panel next Tuesday, but you can also reach out to me via email in case of any question or comment you might have. My email address is on the slide. Thank you very much for your attention and looking forward to receive your feedback.